So, very good conversation between me and Steven. We didn't yet agree on everything, but we progressed a lot. So, do you mind if I try to summarize?
Go ahead.
Or, yeah. The main point that Steven made that really shook things for me, that's really important for me, is when he said, you know, there could be many logic systems and we cannot expect each client to understand every logic system. And that is something I actually agree with. I am trying to come up with a better logic system, but I'm aware this is totally a case of the XKCD. You know, there's 20 standards and now there's 21. And that is not like forcing people to adopt my logic system is not on my goal list, even though I believe it brings something to the table. And that way, the distinction that Steven tries to draw between being able to express claims and calculate contradictions, and it's still, I think there is a distinction there. We don't agree where that boundary is drawn exactly. And the whole point is there, like, he's interested in all the relevant premises to a conclusion, right? As an entity. And I said, it's often useful to have gray box subgroups of premises so that you can compare those subgroups of premises, even if you don't agree of how to formalize, how these premises interact in the proof.
And I agreed on that, right?
Yeah, no, this is what we agreed on.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at the possibility of having a kind of intermediate form where we can say, this is a group of relevant premises. We don't know how to adjust them, and that is another layer, because that is the layer where logic is involved, and we may not even agree on which logic system we're using. And that's, I mean,
well, it's an optional layer. Whether it
exactly
exists in the same library or not, the point is it's optional. The client doesn't necessarily have to know the concrete logic types to show the groups or do anything meaningful with them.
Yeah, and because there's too many logics, and that's an argument I do buy. So the idea is, can we have a representation of support and or compounds? And we're still arguing that one out, because I still believe that compounds separate from the support are the right way to represent this, as opposed to putting the compounds in the support, like but these are, because I think it's possible to agree or disagree with compounds as a whole, and we found certainly there's use cases where a conclusion can be a compound, so it's not just the premises. So that's a case. So I'm definitely moving away from multi-premise. So but the idea is there would be a,
well, okay, just to register, I disagree with both those points, but okay.
Which points, to make it explicit, because a lot was said?
Okay. That you can disagree with a compound on its own, and also that a compound can be the conclusion of something. I disagree with both of those, but okay.
Okay, good.
But what about everything that was said before that? Because let's start with the agreement and then let's move on to the disagreement.
I agree.
I don't know if I understood fully all the implications, because you were talking about things that we hadn't really gone into before.
In a way, we have, because the question is,
but anyway,
what do you determine to be logic? And I guess my point is that even something like a compound claim could be considered logic, and that's why the current distinction is. But regardless of where we draw that line,
I understand that.
It's more about the usefulness of a line.
So I understand that, and I understand that, you know, having lots of different logic systems, it makes it impossible for everybody to support everything. Okay. that doesn't mean you throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think
No,
a
it's not
lot
saying.
of the reasons for these advanced structures are about improving the organization of the base layer. And I disagree, or I'm unhappy with the statement that like the base layer is just supposed to gather all the premises and then you can work out in a higher layer how they all work together. I'm unhappy with that statement.
Yeah, so there's still disagreement, in other words, with what Marc-Antoine and I seem to somewhat agree. And Marc-Antoine better understands what I'm after, whether or not he fully agrees with it. You right now saying you disagree even with that, right? You want the base layer to be more formal.
And again, I think the disagreement is a lot smaller than it sounds as usual, because I agree with your goal to centralize debate. I agree with a lot of, when we come to the end of things, how you structure all of it.
But those are goals. The question is, how do you achieve that? And that's where the disagreement lies.
Right. And I think that what I'm seeing through this exercise of trying out advanced structures and then seeing how they map to a base layer is a lot of the work. It ends up being standardizing how I'd like to see it in the base layer. Like in the mapping, what it tells me is that this is the optimal way to organize it in the base layer. And the optimal way to organize it, like I have a very high disagreement with the way you have structured the there are 9 planets debate. And that's something we can go into detail again another time. But I see that as a way of collecting all the premises. And part of it comes to the so that's of it, like you can't score your planets debate.
Maybe I'll share the just
before we go deeper.
It's not going deeper, it's simply to give the context of what the 9 planets are. This is what is referred to. Like there are 9 planets in the solar system, then you just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You don't formalize the actual count here. You can even see that I disagree that Pluto is a planet. So to me, there's only 8. That's why I disagree that there are 9 planets in the system. But then recently, Timothy pointed out planet X is a planet. So actually, does that oppose or support it? It all depends on what you believe, basically. But that's the point. I just want to add the arguments that people make. If those require more complicated logics, such as counting and whatever, and mutual exclusive claims, we can do that in a higher level. This is the confusion, not the confusion. This is what Timothy doesn't like if this is how we do it in a base layer.
But by the way, I must say I'm more and more thinking in the base layer. You won't be happy with that if we're erasing formula, we should even erase support oppose.
Yeah, I also played around with the thought, but it's not workable for me. But yeah, I consider it the same thing.
But just to answer one thing that Tim said, it's like, are we throwing out the baby with the bathwater? Let's be very clear. It's not that the logic layer is thrown away. It's separated, but it's not thrown away. I want the logic layer. I'm not going to move forward without the logic layer.
That's a straw man argument I keep highlighting. I also don't want to throw away the logic layer. I'm saying the base layer should be able to work independently of the logic layer. Like if you want to add logic on top of this, fine, we can agree on how to model that, but I want the base layer that can work and can be visualized as done here without having to render that logic, essentially.
The question is,
and I'm working towards that goal with all the mapping work. Like I'm taking that as a given that there's this base layer, and part of the work of working out these mappings is just saying, well, how should these kinds of debates be structured in the base layer, right? Even though the base layer is flexible and accepts everything, we hope that there's some kind of curation.
Doesn't that contradict what you said before?
Well, I think we're disagreeing on what is base, what is non-base.
No, I don't think so. It kind of what I said was that I think our disagreement is smaller than it sounds, because I didn't like the statement of I just want to grab all the premises and we can work out elsewhere.
Well, what I'm proposing now, and this is at the heart of the other 2 points you disagreed with, and maybe we do need to move there, is how I think that it's important to have in a support, like multiple supports for the same claim with different sets of relevant arguments, whether we can mark them as opposing, supporting, or neither, because I think neither is a category, absolutely. And I think that's either we forget the whole opposing, supporting, neither, or we make neither as a category. But I'm saying that the base has to know that not all relevant arguments are supporting or opposing. For me, that's fundamental.
And that's where I disagree with that. I think that is no, I
what you don't. We had XOR as a use case. Come on.
No, XOR is okay. XOR is obviously
so if XOR is a use case, A and B is neither supporting.
It's semantics. Define what an argument is. You're using two different notions for an argument.
I don't want to get rid of.
That's why I want to make a distinction between proof and an argument. You're calling what I also want to support a proof, Mike Antoine, but what you're calling an argument right now, I would simply call a proof, and yes, I want to support it. But I'm suggesting that there's a clear difference between the two.
I'm speaking about the expressive layer. Thank you. I'm saying there's a notion at the basic level that there's a set of relevant arguments, relevant premises, right? If you want to introduce the distinction between supporting and opposing.
Let's make this concrete. There are 9 planets in the solar system. Of course, the set of relevant premises, what are they going to be? Like the person saying 9 planets would say,
those are all relevant arguments. That's absolutely true.
But then is planet X and Pluto, is planet X relevant or not?
It's in certain arguments, it will be seen as relevant and others not. And you can even have an argument about its relevance. That's fine. But what I'm saying is saying these arguments, which are relevant, if we want to introduce a notion that relevant should mean either support or oppose, I say it has to be support, oppose, neither. Because in most of those cases, those things are neither.
But what's the neither to use?
Right, and that's the part I disagree with. Yeah.
Okay. I'm saying not all relevant arguments are clear, oppose, or support.
Can you give an example?
Well, this is a perfectly good example.
Planet X is a planet is a good example.
Yeah. It's
an excellent example.
It can be a support or it can be an oppose depending on the valence of the other arguments.
Exactly.
So it's neither. On its own, it's neither.
And that's why it can appear on both sides. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the whole point. That's what I mean by
which is one way of displaying neither. It's
exactly. But it's only neither if people make both points. And indeed,
I actually disagree that it's neither. First of all, I disagree it's neither. I say it's, what you really mean to say is it's both.
Or it could be it's either. Yes. Okay, fair enough. Either is more precise than neither. That's I'll buy that. Okay, fair.
But still, I think
but it's a separate status than support or oppose.
Yeah, but I think then your work just isn't done. What you're doing is allowing people. I don't see that bucket as being useful. I see it as being a place to put unfinished arguments, right? Because planet X is a planet. It actually supports or opposes in the context or in the grouping or in the compound claim of there are 9 planets and the 9 planets are Mercury, Venus, blah, 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 and planet X.
Yep.
So it supports there and it opposes in the argument, there are actually 10 planets, including Pluto and planet X, right?
Okay. So let me get through that. I agree totally that in this case, we can do argument premise groupings, and I believe in doing premise groupings, making compounds. And in those compounds, it might turn out that some of the arguments have a clearer role, like they can go from either to either clearly support or clearly opposes, because we're in a more precise grouping. But I'm saying there's also either can also be maintained as a case in simple grouping, such as AX, something that is equivalent to AX or B. Either A or B, but not both, makes C happen. So the fact that A is true is totally a either in that case. And so either is always a case. So that's one thing I'm saying. The other thing I'm saying, okay, now the question is, are groupings meaningful? I think we all agree of that. Are groupings meaningful independent of their use as a premise in an argument is something we don't agree on. And that's a separate conversation and we should get into it. I think it's perfectly valid to disagree with a grouping without disagreeing, not in the presence of an argument, but that's point of contention. But certainly we all agree that groupings are meaningful.
No, that's what I keep saying. I think, well, yes, but not on a, not to centralize disagreements. Groupings are useful for proofs. That's what I keep saying. The use case for grouping claims is to structure proofs. Okay,
so you're saying groupings don't belong in the base layer, and I'm saying they do.
I'm not against storing proofs in the base layer. I'm just saying they're separate from this view that is shown right now. I imagine
it's a different view. I
imagine opposing. I made the mock-up before. Like here could be a sidebar where you have all the different proofs that show that there are 9 planets in the solar system or not. But it's a higher level abstraction. That's what I keep saying.
I never agreed that the base layer was isomorphic with this view. It's not because this view is useful that it defines the base layer. That's certainly
not something. If it's isomorphic, we don't have to go into that discussion. Just
no,
do you understand what I mean when I say I don't think groupings are useful in this view?
Oh, I agree totally.
We need however you store the data, this view is the view that I want to be able to derive.
You need to be able to derive it. That's a perfectly valid, but that doesn't mean it's the only view that can be derived.
No, that's why I'm saying, yeah, specifically, proofs are a valid thing you want to show as well.
Yeah.
Specifically, while I'm doing this exercise on mappings, one of the things that happens is the second layer is going to change the base layer. It's going to reorganize things according to its mappings, which means as much as you like this view, it's very unlikely that the advanced structures will map out to this thing here, because
and vice versa. That's a question. So the reason I like this base view is, as Marc-Antoine summarized, what if you disagree with the formalisms on higher level abstractions? For me, the higher level abstractions, they simply automate many things. Like, for example, right now, if I want to say, there are 10 planets in the solar system. You see there's a lot of shit I have to add here, right? I have to say Pluto. Pluto is a planet. That's it, right? You need to keep adding all of these. That's, I think, where the higher level abstractions come in. They take away that laborious work, but that doesn't mean that that's still not represented in the base layer, or it can even be visualized better in a higher level layer. But what if you disagree with that compound, with that high level formalism? That's when I think you can always go back to, like, here, where was it that I added it? Like here, and then you can still start adding arguments against relevance here in the base layer. And yes, at some point that means that you will no longer be able to map these claims from the base layer to the higher level representation, but it also shows that there might be disagreement with your higher level representation. That's the interesting bit about the duality of these two. And the specifics are, I think we need to do the mapping just like you did with the mutual exclusion for each and every one of them, and then see the trade-off between what happens if we only allow it to be expressed in a formalized way in essentially this view. Like, would this be curated out? Like, how would
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
If it would be curated
the moment somebody,
then that's the mock-up I keep asking for. Can you mock up what this would look like with competing arguments for this?
Right. I'm working on that with some other examples right now. I'm doing the Trump wall example.
Yeah, exactly.
And I did a syllogism.
And I proposed something with my little matrix view. And
go ahead.
No. I think we agree on many things at this point. We agree that the Bayes view is not going to be necessarily isomorphic to this, but it is a requirement that this view can be derived from the Bayes data model. And furthermore, more than that, that you can build an instance of the Bayes data model from only the information available in this view. I think that's also part of your requirement, and a reasonable one, right? It doesn't mean it's isomorphic, but it means that if all you have is the information in this view, can you build something in the data model? That should be possible. That's a perfectly fine thing to ask for, right? I think, no. That doesn't mean that the data model, that doesn't mean that there won't be a translation layer. But yeah, the translation layer has to satisfy both those conditions, being able to derive the information in this view and being derivable from only the information in this view.
But that's an implementation detail.
Even in a degenerate case. And this is why I keep speaking about gray boxing. Okay, sorry, that's important. That was part of our conversation. I'd like to summarize. I said, it makes sense to say, because
it does. The gray box concept as an abstraction without knowing the specific logic is relevant, because then you can say how many people agree with the relevant set of premises, regardless of what the logic is. I understand that's because the abstraction
I tried
is
to summarize them for those who did not follow our conversation. Sorry, Stephen.
I just want to emphasize that the usefulness is the abstraction. Like, these things are only useful if the system can act on the abstraction without knowing the specifics. That's always
describe it before just defining
it. Go ahead.
What I was saying by a gray box is, if all you have is the information in Stephen's view, you should be able to say there's a bunch of premises. We don't know what the formula is between them, but there's a bunch of premises which are relevant to that conclusion. And that's all we know. In progressive formalization, we'll try to find out exactly how they stand together or don't stand together, and maybe break it down into different arguments with different compounds, which would also be gray boxes because we still don't know the formula, but we can compare the premise set between those compounds. But all that the compounds are saying is, those are all relevant. And we can argue about the relevance by comparing relevant premise sets. But that is separate from saying those are relevant and the truth value derivation is in this combination, which I agree can be put in another layer, obviously not dismissed, but that's what I call gray boxing. Because yeah, that's a reality. Sometimes what you'll have is Stephen's view, and then you have to map it to something, and that something will be, it's like this incremental formalization. It could be the equivalent of starting from a long complex sentence which nobody has broken down yet. Does that make sense? Good. Now, should we move on to the question of why I think it makes sense for compounds to be claims in their own right?
I'm ready if other people are ready.
Stephen, you're muted.
I said yes, but do it slowly and ask intermittently before moving on to like how everyone understands it and whether there's agreement on that.
Absolutely fair. Okay, so what I'm saying is there are many natural cases of argumentation where you have an idea about the truth value of a compound statement, maybe a conjunction or disjunction, even though you do not know the truth value of the atoms in that compound. Classic example is dilemma, either A or not A, but it could be more...
That's an abstract example. Let's take a concrete one. I posted one on Slack. Let's find the link. Because a dilemma is an abstraction. Like, what's a concrete dilemma?
Concrete dilemma. Well, A or not A, it can be anything, right? Either Socrates is mortal or he isn't. There's more interesting dilemmas where either A or B, and you kind of know that A and B are contradictory somewhere. Well, I mean, a good example here is Tim's. Either we all go to this restaurant today at 12, or we all go to this other restaurant. It can be both. It can be other things, but it cannot be both. They're contradictory, and we just know they're contradictory. So I know that both cannot be true, even if I don't know which one it will be yet. And I can say, well, we cannot do both without putting it into any argument. Maybe I can argue for it, say, well, because we do not have the gift of ubiquity, because those restaurants are just things, because whatever.
That's the thing I questioned though, Marc-Antoine. You just jumped ahead and said, without putting it in an argument. So I can't think of any use case where you would make a claim that, like a dilemma like this, or like any A and B where you know it's false, where you would say it's false without putting it in an argument. That's I for the life of me can't find an example.
No. I'm not. Okay. You cannot find an example where you cannot desire to put it in an argument. Mm-hmm. That's fine, but that doesn't mean that it needs an argument to exist as a belief. That's a distinct thing. Okay. I can hold a belief about it without putting it in an argument.
That's what I'm
justifying that belief may entail an argument, but that's a separate step. I'm saying having a belief and justifying
isn't that an artificial separation?
Things.
Or isn't,
I don't think so.
Why does the separation come from? If you can't come up with any use case where you would express that belief of the compound as false without associating an argument, why separate it?
What I'm saying is in all those cases, you say, oh, but it would fit in that argument. I'm saying you're putting it in an argument is a posteriori. Take the case of we cannot all go to this restaurant or all go to that other restaurant at the same time. I don't see the point of having an argument for it. Maybe you say, oh, this needs an argument to justify. I don't see it.
It does, because it's only a valid mutually exclusive thing. If that's the assumption, it has to be one or the other. That's the entire context. Like, if that's not the case, then
no. I'm not saying that it has to be one or the other. I'm saying it cannot be both. That's all I'm saying.
It can be. It's assuming you can't go to both. That's the examples we talked about last meeting.
Okay, wait. Yeah. First of all, maybe a cleaner example is one I gave a long time back, which was like either Stephen proposed the idea or Marc-Antoine proposed the idea, right?
That's not a clear example.
That's a clear XOR.
No, it could be both.
No, it's a clear. Okay, either.
Now, if you say either you proposed it first or I proposed it first, that would work.
That's fine. Okay, exactly. Either Marc-Antoine had the idea first or Stephen did. Okay, it's a clean XOR. Now, that claim can be opposed by saying no, it was Felix.
Arguments could happen.
Right, so it's a false XOR or whatever. Right, so I agree. There's a claim there that has this XOR structure that can be debated on its own and accept arguments. Correct. Okay. What I don't agree is that thing is what has that formula of XOR that you're talking about. I don't think that satisfies the whole purpose of a compound claim, which is to essentially create an auto-determination, so you only have to argue the premises, right? The truth of the premises and the usefulness of the thing. So for example, if I yeah.
Sorry, this is a petition of principle. You're saying you refuse my saying there's other usage for the compound claim because my examples do not follow the only usage you see for the compound claim.
No, what I'm saying is that well, I'm saying that your use of compound claim, your whole purpose of compound claim, or at least the whole reason for formulas and that sort of thing, and the does not apply to this standalone
There's
claim.
A different use case. The question is why? What's the so that? And I think that if you try to make that explicit, I think that's where the distinction lies. What, like, why do you want to model this? What's the so that? I think that's what you're hinting at, Timothy, and I would tend to agree.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, what is the point of having a formula inside this thing, right?
Okay, that's a valid question. I was tempted at first to say I don't need to show that. I'm trying to model expression, and this is a valid expression. So that's reason enough.
You can do that, like Timothy said, you can do that. You can have a claim that says blah 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 XOR that it's expressed. Like, why do you need to be able to calculate it? That's the question. Why does your system need to be able to do the calculation?
That's valid. But besides, it's the question is, but there's two questions here. One is what you're saying is that the A and B, like let's take a simple compound A and B, and I'm saying A and B supports C, but I think A and B is false. I don't know if A or B is false, but I know A and B is false for whatever reason. I feel it. And even if I'm not clear about which, or maybe both are false of A and B. And yes, it's true that many so that's involve arguments because we're interested in arguments. But I'm saying sometimes I could just be interested in A and B is false without argument, but that's not the point. The so that is true that the so that is often using it as a premise or even using it as a conclusion. The question is it relevant to being able to oppose A and B on its own without opposing the premises? And I'm saying it can be. If you have an argument where you're saying A and B entails C, you may not know the truth status of A and B, but you have reasons to believe C is false, so you have reasons to believe A and B is false without knowing anything about the atoms.
Then are you saying opposing A and B is the same now as saying that A and B is false? Because when you say opposing, I think we're talking about adding an opposing claim to A and B. You're saying you want to express this belief with A and B.
That's
which I call scoring, which they're two different. Are you talking about both or one or the other?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I agree they're probably not exactly equivalent, though one certainly entails the other. I think either probably entails the other.
The white paper refers to scoring versus adding arguments. I guess, Timothy, correct me if I'm wrong. But that's an obvious distinction. One adds supports in a current model, and the other is the scoring mechanism we haven't even started talking about yet.
Yeah, but they're related, right? I agree they're distinct, yes, but they're related.
Well, all argumentation is related in one way or another.
Yeah, but anyway, that's not the point. What I'm saying is making the point about A and B as a compound is a valid operation. That's all I'm saying. It's even more obvious when we're doing it with conclusions. A hence either B or C. I don't know which, but A hence either B or C. B or C as a conclusion is a compound. So the compound has to have a truth value, even if I don't know the truth value of the components.
But it's the conclusion of a function, the proof, right? It's again, now you're overloading what a conclusion is here. It's different from the sense of conclusion we have in our current support model. And yeah, that's why we're having the discussion. Do we want to broaden that abstraction to also include functions or not? What I'm saying is I don't want to do that. I want to have a separate model that stores functions and then the current one that stores arguments.
Yeah, but okay, the function, the separate model is the one that would do calculations about it, but you never denied that logic is a language, mathematics is a language, and all proofs, they're also, even if you have to express them as language, which I agreed with, it's still entailment. If I say, I gave the example, an example of an intuitionistic proof a few weeks ago of root 2 exponent, root 2 exponent, root 2. Well, either it's rational or irrational, and hence blah, blah, blah. And I went down the dilemma route. And either way, I have a way to say irrational exponent, irrational is rational. But I don't know which branch leads me there. This is a very good example. It's doing the calculations is very formal, but the argument about the dilemma, the structure of the argument of the dilemma, that is language level, and should be expressible at the base layer, saying this expresses something that can go in either of those way. Either of those way ends up at the same ending point, and that's what interests me.
Yeah, me too. But so define base layer, I mean,
so that belongs in the base layer. And here we have a compound as a conclusion in its own right, even though I know nothing about the components.
Yeah.
Again, so being able to determine, to speak about the truth value or the support of a compound independently of the support for its components is important even at the base layer.
Yeah, I think I see your point, and that's also why I said I need to think more about this. I mean, it would be the equivalent of on Socrates that you have to show it blah 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 and blah 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 if you ever want to show that proof section that I'm talking about, because where else would you show that if you don't have a compound claim represented somewhere where you can show all the proofs that show that compound as true. So I agree with that. Yeah, I need to think about this. That's a valid point.
I disagree with it because
okay, what's the big
exactly because any disagreement about that conclusion is necessarily a disagreement about the formula you've embedded in there.
That is true.
And you're not like, then what is the point of supplying the formula embedded in that claim if the arguments against it are going to deny the very usefulness of that formula, right? Which means that the formula should be pulled out and used as a support, and the support should be debated about the appropriateness of the formula.
Tim, right? I think you're arguing against a separate use case than the one I described. You're still arguing against the F equals MA use case, which is a distinct one.
Do we have a whiteboard? No, there's no whiteboard.
We have a whiteboard in. If we do share screen, we can
I
say
have one here, but
here's a whiteboard.
Yeah, I quickly draw it, Mark-Antoine. It will help visualizing this. Because I'm with you, and I agree this is an important use case that needs to be discussed how it fits in, regardless of what we do.
Yeah, but
so your mouse drawing skills.
Yeah, my mouse drawing.
Probably better to use a different tool.
Yeah, no, you know what? I am going to.
Yeah.
Don't do plant UML.
No, I'll actually use.
If you want, I can drive. I could do the draw.
No, I'd rather do this.
Yeah, draw IO works.
Yeah, I'll use Graphel. I'm used to Graphel.
Yeah, screen sharing a chat, just so you know.
Yeah, I'm aware. That's okay. So so we're not doing this one. Canvas, thank you. So I have.
Is that how you write canvas in French?
Yes.
It looks like a typo.
Have you, well, I mean, each language has its own spelling for these things, yes. I can double click on this, can't I? Oh, yeah.
Look at utils in the title.
Yeah, that one I knew actually. But yeah, indeed, it also looks like a typo if you don't know you're looking at French.
Shapes, thank you, that's better. Okay, and this I should be, yes, good. So, so actually, let me do the components first. R2 exponent.
Can we maybe use like something easy? Is the example of the missile launch a good one or not? At least for me, it's easy to grasp it in my head.
What's the missile launch example? I'm not familiar with it.
It's the one that I wrote in Hangouts earlier today. I'll copy paste it to chat. Just something I quickly came up with.
Let me do this one meanwhile. And
yeah.
Let's see if
there's a lot of stuff to scroll through. Oh, I'm way too back far in the past.
Hmm. Time. Break.
I posted it in chat.
Oh, that one. Yes. Sorry.
I think that fits the bill here, right? Because the conclusion is Anne has pressed the button and Bob has pressed the button is false. Because only Anne and Bob can press the button. When both Anne and Bob have pressed the button, the missile launches and the missile hasn't launched.
Yeah.
Safety mechanism to prevent World War III. Oh, well, that's not going very well.
Well, yes, indeed. I could do that one also. It's not terribly difficult.
But so, Timothy, I guess the first question is, do you disagree that you can say that you can disagree with the conclusion here, being Anne has pressed the button and Bob has pressed the button, or being false?
I mean, first of all, you would make a claim. Neither Anne and Bob did not press the button together, right? That's a claim we're talking about, right? Which is
that's another, yeah, exactly. That's another way of phrasing the compound claim. Yes,
right. It's another way of phrasing this structure.
Well, assuming that they have to press it together, that's not.
Yeah, but
for
see,
the sake of.
My point is that one of the arguments made against that can totally can reject the actual structure of the claim there, which is the mechanism failed, right? And so it doesn't matter what formula you've put in there. Instead, what I would do is I would say, okay, I'm going to prove it by saying, in other words, you have a statement, Anne and Bob did not press the button together. That's the claim, right? And somebody would prove it by saying, okay, we have this mechanism where Anne and Bob have to push the button together, and that's false. In other words, not Anne and Bob pressing the button together is my formula, because that's how the mechanism works. And I'm going to plug in Anne, press the button, and Bob press the button, and we do that.
It's a similar argument as what I'm saying, but the point that Mike Antoine was making was that you need to be able to simply say that, and it's a different form. You need to be able to say, and this is interesting, right? You need to be able to say, how did you put it? Anne and Bob did not press the button together, is false. But is that the equivalent? Is that a duplicate of the compound claim, if we support compound claims of Anne has pressed the button and Bob has pressed the button being false? Is that a duplicate claim?
Or the formal equivalent of, and I'm saying you need to be able to give a truth value to that.
No, but see, yeah,
you even used it in your language. You said, oh, well, A press the button, or B, Bob press the button is false.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean we want to formalize it, and that's the discussion right now.
No, but
but
I'm saying there's a formal version of that and there's an informal version of that. And I'm saying in either case, we need to be able to argue against or argue for the compound as a compound. That's what I'm saying, to say the compound is true, the compound is false, even if we don't know the component's truth value, even if we assert complete ignorance of the compound truth values.
Yeah, but
But
you're
we can
assuming,
still-
What I'm saying
that
is
the
that-
components are formalized. I think the discussion is whether or not you want to formalize the components if you want to argue against
No, this
it.
has nothing to do with formalization. That's what I keep saying. The fact that, okay, if we don't have formalization, we don't have the components. It's fine. Okay, we don't have A press the button, we don't have Bob press the button.
Exactly.
But if
Your conclusion is that they have not pressed the button together, that's a claim you add.
Yeah.
That's what I think Timothy and I are
compound,
saying.
The unformalized compound exists as a claim and is arguable for and against, and you can say it's true or false as a compound, even if it's an informal compound. That's
Yes,
fine.
yeah, that's true. So
No,
I
but
agree with
all
that.
I'm saying is, yeah, I agree with that, and I'm saying, and I'm going one step further, which is saying, as a claim, only the informal version is useful. I'm saying there's no use whatsoever in formalizing it inside the claim.
As a conclusion, there is a use for
As
a
a
proof
conclusion.
that models exactly what you're
Yes.
saying, but then
Exactly.
that proof can help you if it can help you show the informed conclusion. Like, hey, if you believe this proof, the informed conclusion, you should also believe or not believe, depending on the proof. And that's why what I'm arguing. Like, the whole compound is only useful in that use case.
It doesn't have to be a proof to be useful. It can also be like the UI showing inconsistencies.
Exactly. But that's, yeah.
But once again, you're saying making the equivalence between the informal and formal is useless then? I'm just trying to make sure I heard right, because that sounds uncharacteristic.
In the claim, I see there's a use case for putting some sort of proof formalization in a compound claim as an argument, as a support. But I think trying to formalize it inside a claim is pointless. Inside the top level standalone claim, because the things you want to argue against it, yeah.
Without being connected to the others, you mean? When you say inside?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what you mean by inside.
Yeah, I'd have to, here, let me.
Okay, you
try to
drive.
show a graph. Yeah.
You drive, because
okay.
This seems so unbelievable as stated.
But
which is exactly the moment we need diagrams, right?
It is a discussion about modeling, because I think nobody disagrees that you can say A and B is false. I mean, you can, yeah, sure, but it doesn't mean you have to model it. The question is, what's the use case of modeling it, and what do we get out of that modeling?
That's a valid question.
Right.
So it is a modeling discussion.
I have no problem with that.
So whatever, and can we take the similar one of they did, or here? Okay, and Bob did not press the button together.
Drop together. Together is not in the example.
Yeah,
it's adding context.
But it is together. I mean, it's did not both press the button. Is whatever.
No, it's not what we mean. It's neither Anne and Bud press the button. Is what
it's ambiguous.
Oh,
Leave it ambiguous.
No, it's important to know which one I'm doing. Is it neither Anne nor Bob press the button?
Yeah, that's
because I thought it was that they both have to press the button in order for it to happen, and it didn't happen. So the both pressing did not happen.
Did not both press the button, but it doesn't have to be together. That's what I'm saying. Just right. Anne and Bob did not both press the button. Then you're correct.
There, that's what yeah, okay.
I misunderstood. Okay. Example. That's fine. No
right. Okay, so this is an and, right?
This is an and.
So when I say it's a not of an and, right?
No, one second. Here you have, okay, that's the compound. Okay, cool.
It's a not of an and.
Define
right?
compounds. Is it a modeled compound, or it's because we're also very ambiguous when we say compound. Is it an informal compound, or is it a formalized compound? We need to be clear when we're talking about this, because a lot of
this right here, this claim is an informal compound.
Exactly. Good.
Right. And now and the way I've talked about like using compounds is as a premise to support something
Formalized
else,
compounds, right?
A formalized compound, right? This is the formalized structure.
Good.
So in this case, I'll just call it not and, right? And
Press the button.
pressed the button. Bob pressed the button, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So as a support, right? There's three ways you can argue against this thing here, right? You're making the point that they did not do this thing, okay? And somebody could argue, no, I can prove it that Ann pressed a button. I can prove it that Bob pressed the button. And by your formula, this comes out to be false, right?
That's an option.
And
yes.
so you can spend your time just arguing each fact.
Yep, you can do
You know, if this is what we call a sufficient support, if it's sufficient, then the fact that it's true proves the end, right? Okay, but that's.
I would not call it a support. I'm a bit strange here.
No,
okay, no, just question. For me, this is an equivalence. This is an interpretation. There's a claim somewhere
Same for me.
that the not and, the formal, is equivalent to the informal. And it's not about one is a support for the other. It's one is claimed to be equivalent. It's not the same.
I got it. But the point is that you can make arguments that defeat essentially the use of this formula as the proof for the claim.
No,
which
it's
is
proof you're assuming support, which as I would not do that.
Yes, but the fact
you can argue against the equivalence. You can say this is not a good interpretation.
Listen to me. The fact that you can argue against the validity of this as a support is the same thing as saying if they're equivalent, then I don't know what it means if they're equivalent and yet the formula is not sufficient. What does it mean if this claim, because you have somewhere else, watch, okay. Someone else.
Can I give an example? Because I mean, this by the way is a great example because it's a small scope, and that's also why I prefer this one over the MOF and some of the other ones, and why I prefer starting with compounds in a base layer as opposed to mutual exclusion, because already this is tricky. So I agree that Ann and Bob did not both press buttons is the same as a compound argument, Ann pressed the button, Bob pressed the button, except that it's an incremental formalization of the former. It adds some logic to it, right? That's why I keep calling this a proof of the informal claim. It's not the same as a support.
I would not call it a proof. I would call it a formalization. It's
formalization. Let's call it formalization.
It's very different. It's very different.
The reason why I call it proof or a formalization is because it always entails additional implicit premises for this proof to work. My question is, how can you counter those in the base layer? Specifically, here there's something to do with binary logic, basically speaking. Like if two claims are true, what is it here?
We're getting away from the we're getting away from the main point. The main point is whether or not these are one and the same.
Well,
right?
The same in what? Formally modeled should be modeled.
Whether the formal version is strictly equivalent to the informal version, and
it should always be falsifiable. That was what I was getting at. So no, it should always be falsifiable.
Let's be a bit more quiet and try to understand what Tim wants to say.
Yeah, but
no.
For me, okay, sorry, I really want to go here. First, I agree that if it's an equivalence, that's also a claim and that's contestable. Somebody could say that is not a correct formalization. But the example Tim's trying to give with the mechanism may have failed. It is not attacking the formalization. It's attacking.
Right. No, that's why I'm pausing here. I was thinking about the fact that the
it's
missile.
Because you used the informal premise as a premise for a real support, which is this would have caused the missile to fire, and we know the missile didn't fire, hence we know that the compound didn't happen, and then the mechanism may have failed as a rebuttal to that support, which is totally unrelated. But what I'm saying is the Anne and Bob did not both press the button is a premise as a whole in that other support. And it is still providing that we don't have a rebuttal for the interpretation. I'm supposing the interpretation is right. So there's no arrow from this to that. That's what I'm saying. Putting in that. Okay, so that would be a rebuttal.
Hasn't launched. Oh.
Yeah, in the example,
no,
it was the, yeah, he's inverting
it.
it.
If it's red, it's correct.
Yeah. And the question is that now I'm happy, and the red oppose because of the equivalence between the not and the formal and informal is also a rebuttal against the not and so it's possible to have. I would put an arrow from the not and to the from the yeah, there's a rebuttal there, which is fine, that's perfectly fine. No problem with that. That's a nope.
Exactly. No, exactly. This is a really nice example.
No. This arrow would go to the other red envelope.
Huh?
It would go to the other red envelope. It does not attack the equivalence. It attacks the relevance.
But it's because you're modeling it as equivalence. That's the question here.
What I'm doing here is attacking your formula. I'm attacking your formula within the context. Yes, I'm attacking your formula within your context because this structure here is insufficient to prove because it doesn't include the premise that the mechanism worked properly.
No,
yes, it's a missing premise, and so therefore your formula is insufficient for this.
No, it is not. It is insufficient for the link between this and they must hide between the missile launch. This is why I'm saying this arrow from this red arrow points to the other red arrow. It has nothing to do with the equivalence of the formula. It's perfectly unrelated. It points. It says that Anne and Bob did not both press the button.
Well, it points to both, to be honest.
No, it doesn't. No. How does it relate to whether this is a correct interpretation of the informal claim? It does not. But it totally has to do with is this informal claim related to missile launch, which is totally distinct.
There's disagreement on what the not and here means and how the not and the semantics of this being modeled should be interpreted. If there's disagreement on what the abstraction represents, there will always be disagreement on whether or not the error. Yeah. So let's try to uncover what you aim to model. What's the goal of modeling this not and here? You're obviously arguing for equivalence. I don't think Timothy is arguing for equivalence. And that's why the distinction lies.
Yeah, I'm saying this is an interpretation. And if it's not an interpretation, then it's an argument, and I don't think this is an argument. And if there's an argument, it's separate, and it would be, as I said, the first red envelope. That's where there's a real argument. There's a real support or oppose in this case.
So maybe because Tim wants to attack the...
Write it out in plain language. Write out what each use case is in plain language. Timothy is saying, because Anne pressed the button and Bob pressed the button, we know that Anne and Bob did not both press the button. And Marc Antoine is saying Anne pressed the button and Bob pressed the button is the same as saying Anne and Bob did not both press the button, which are two different claims.
And I tend to be a bit to like, it should be possible to say the formula is wrong somehow.
Yeah, it's possible.
No, he agrees with that. It's a different use case.
Okay.
We're right at the crux of something important, and my meeting's already started, so I gotta go. Unfortunately.
Well, we have this model to continue on. This is what I wanted. Okay. I want to go back to more basics. This is the discussion about compounds that I wanted to have. So let's continue.
It got good, and I'm sorry I gotta go.
Yeah, it's a useful conversation.
Yeah,
let's keep it up.
So Friday.
Friday.
See you.
Friday.
Ciao.
Bye.